Close your eyes for just a moment. Try to bring back the exact scent of the living room on a cold Sunday afternoon. Perhaps you can smell the sharp, comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee, mixed with a hint of furniture polish and the distant, earthy scent of a warm stove. Do you hear the steady, rhythmic ticking of the heavy wooden clock on the wall, marking time in a house where nobody was in a rush to be anywhere else? Welcome back to your childhood. Today, we are taking a journey back to the Netherlands of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. We are going to revisit 20 everyday rituals that quietly disappeared from our lives while we were busy growing up. These are the small, beautiful habits that defined a generation. And stay with me until the very end, because the final memory we will revisit holds the absolute essence of what home used to feel like on the darkest, coldest winter nights. Time seemed to flow differently back then, did it not? Days were not measured in notifications or endless scrolls through a screen, but in the reliable routines of our neighborhoods. We often hear today that life is richer now, more connected, and infinitely more convenient. But those of us who remember the streets of the 1970s and 80s know a different truth. We know that waiting for something made it infinitely more valuable. We know that genuine human connection did not require a Wi-Fi signal, but just an open front door, a shared cup of tea, and the willingness to listen. We lived in a world where things were built to last, where clothes were mended, and where everyday tasks were shared experiences rather than solitary chores. It was a time when the neighborhood was an extension of your own living room, and the people who delivered your milk or your mail were part of the fabric of your daily life. Let us step back into that slower, warmer world and remember how we used to live. Let us begin with the gentle hum of the electric cart coming down the street in the early morning. Do you remember the milkman? This was not just a delivery service, it was a daily social event. You would hear the distinct clinking of glass bottles long before he arrived at your doorstep. The milkman knew every family on his route. He knew who was sick, who was celebrating a birthday, and who needed an extra bottle of full-fat milk for the weekend. The ritual was so simple, yet so profound. You would leave your empty, rinsed glass bottles on the front step, often with a small handwritten note tucked inside the neck, asking for an extra carton of buttermilk or perhaps some heavy cream. When you brought the fresh bottles inside, the glass was always ice cold to the touch. The milk tasted different back then, rich and pure, with a layer of cream at the top that you had to shake up. The milkman was a cornerstone of the neighborhood, a friendly face in a grey uniform who brought the dawn with him. And speaking of neighborhood deliveries, how could we ever forget the magical arrival of the driving supermarket? The SRV wagon was a beloved institution of the Dutch suburbs and countryside. You would hear its specific horn, or just the heavy rumble of its engine, and suddenly the housewives of the street would emerge from their front doors, coin purses in hand. Stepping inside that vehicle was like entering a miniature universe of groceries. The aisles were incredibly narrow, forcing neighbors to squeeze past one another, exchanging the latest gossip while reaching for a bag of flour or a tin of vegetables. The air inside the wagon smelled distinctly of fresh bread, strong cheese, and the diesel fumes from the engine. It was an essential lifeline, especially for the elderly, but for us as children, it felt like a traveling treasure chest. We would beg our mothers for a few cents to buy a roll of drop, the salty black licorice, while the driver cheerfully tallied up the bill on a simple paper pad. Now, let us think about the sacred ritual of the coffee points. Every Dutch household had a dedicated drawer for this very purpose. When a package of Douwe Egberts coffee was empty, you never simply threw it away. No, you carefully took a pair of scissors and cut out the little red and white seal. The smell of the roasted coffee grounds would cling to the paper as you snipped around the edges. Then came the ritual of saving them. You would lick the back of these stamps and meticulously paste them into little booklets. It took months, sometimes years, to fill enough booklets to actually exchange them, but the anticipation was part of the joy. When the time finally came, you would take your stack of booklets to the special store and trade them in for something beautiful for the house. Perhaps it was a shiny new set of silver-plated teaspoons, a beautiful serving tray, or a special coffee pot. Those items were earned through patience and countless cups of shared coffee. And speaking of coffee, we must talk about the strict and unwavering etiquette of the biscuit tin. It is a ritual that has become famously associated with our culture. Whether it was 10 o'clock in the morning for coffee or exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon for tea, the tin would make its appearance. It was usually a beautifully decorated metal box, perhaps featuring scenes of old windmills or royal portraits. The host would pry off the tight lid with a soft metallic pop, revealing a neatly arranged selection of treats. You would be offered the tin, and the unwritten rule of the entire nation was that you took exactly one biscuit, just one. It could be a stroopwafel, a speculoos, or a simple Maria biscuit, but you made your choice carefully. Once everyone had taken their single piece, the lid was firmly pressed back onto the tin, and it was placed out of reach. It was not about being stingy, it was about appreciating the small treat you had, savoring it alongside the conversation. Let us move to the weekends, specifically the quiet, stretching hours of a Sunday afternoon. Before the era of endless television channels and digital games, the living room table was cleared for a very specific family battle. The wooden suelback was brought down from the attic or out from behind the sofa. The long, polished wooden board was placed perfectly center. Do you remember the smell of the wood and the light dusting of talcum powder we used to make the surface incredibly slick? The ritual involved sliding 30 wooden discs through 4 small arches at the end of the board. The sound is unforgettable, a sharp, satisfying clack as the discs collided, followed by the dull thud as they hit the backboard. It was a game of intense concentration and fierce family rivalry. Grandparents played against grandchildren, arguing over discs that were only halfway through the slot. It was simple, it was loud, and it kept the whole family anchored to the same room for hours. Wednesday afternoons held a special kind of magic for children. It was the middle of the week, but school ended at noon. The entire afternoon stretched out before us like a vast, unexplored continent of free time. We would rush home, tossing our heavy leather school bags in the hallway. The ritual of the Wednesday afternoon was deeply tied to the television schedule. The television set itself was a massive piece of wooden furniture, and you had to press a heavy button and wait for the tubes to warm up. The picture would slowly bloom onto the thick glass screen. We sat cross-legged on the rug, waiting for the magical tunes of our favorite children's shows. Whether it was the intricate puppet world of De Fabeltjeskrant, where Mr. Owl would read the daily news of the animal forest, or the adventures of Tita Tovenaar, these shows were a shared national experience. On Thursday morning in the schoolyard, every single child knew exactly what had happened on television the day before. As the week drew to a close, Saturday brought its own unavoidable ritual, the weekly bath. In the 1960s and early 70s, before modern central heating and gleaming tiled bathrooms were standard, staying clean required serious effort. The large oval zinc tub was brought into the kitchen right next to the stove where it was warmest. Pots and kettles of water were boiled on the gas burners and carefully poured into the tub to get the temperature just right. The scent of Zwitzel baby soap, or perhaps the sharp, clean smell of green Biotex, filled the steam in the kitchen. If you came from a large family, you knew the unspoken hierarchy of the bathwater. The youngest usually went first, enjoying the clearest, hottest water, while the older siblings had to make do with what was left. It was a chore, certainly, but sitting by the warm stove, wrapped in a thick towel while your mother vigorously dried your hair, was a feeling of pure, secure comfort. Winter in those days felt much colder, and it brought a ritual that transformed the entire country. The moment the canals, lakes, and flooded meadows froze solid, the nation held its breath. Natural ice skating was not just a sport, it was a spontaneous festival. Do you remember the old wooden skates, the houtjes? You would sit on the freezing, snow-covered bank, your fingers completely numb, struggling to tie the rough leather straps tightly around your leather shoes. Once on the ice, the cold wind would bite at your cheeks, but you did not care. The sound of hundreds of metal blades rhythmically scraping across the dark, clear ice echoed across the flat landscape. And then, the best part of the ritual, the small canvas tents set up on the ice selling koek and zopi. Your hands wrapped around a steaming mug of hot anise milk or thick green pea soup, warming your frozen fingers while you laughed with neighbors you usually only saw over the garden fence. Springtime meant spring cleaning, and that brought the incredibly loud, rhythmic soundtrack of the Mattenklopper. Before vacuum cleaners were powerful enough to truly deep clean a heavy rug, the dust had to be beaten out by hand. The heavy woolen living room carpets would be rolled up, carried outside, and draped over a sturdy metal rack or a sturdy clothesline in the garden. Then, the housewife would take the woven rattan carpet beater, an object that looked a bit like a giant tennis racket, and go to work. The sound was distinct, a sharp, echoing thwack that could be heard 3 streets away. You could see the thick clouds of grey dust billowing up into the spring sunshine with every strike. It was a physical, exhausting ritual, but there was an immense sense of pride in it. When the carpet was finally carried back inside and unrolled on the living room floor, the whole house smelled crisp, aired out, and profoundly clean. For us children, the ritual of outdoor play had a very specific boundary, governed not by clocks or mobile phones, but by the street lights. After dinner, if the weather was even slightly forgiving, we were sent out to play in the street. The street was our playground. We drew hopscotch squares with chalk on the pavement, we played endless games of marbles in the dirt patches under the trees, and we jumped rope until our legs ached. The neighborhood echoed with the sounds of children shouting, laughing, and arguing over the rules of a game. We had no concept of time, and our parents rarely checked their watches. The universal signal that the day was over came from the municipality. First, there was a soft electrical hum from the tall lampposts. Then, the bulbs would flicker to life, slowly warming up to cast a golden orange glow over the street. That light was the undisputed curfew. No arguments were allowed. When the streetlights came on, you ran home. Let us take a moment to remember the sheer tactile joy of our old money, the glorious Dutch guilder. Paying for groceries or a round of drinks was a visual and physical experience. The coins were heavy and substantial. The Rijksdaalder, the 2.5 guilder coin, had a real weight to it. It felt like a small treasure in your pocket. But the true masterpiece was the paper money. Our banknotes were celebrated around the world for their brilliant, vibrant designs. Do you remember the bright yellow 50 guilder note with the beautiful sunflower? Or the legendary 250 guilder note featuring the lighthouse? Handling this money felt special. The paper was crisp, the colors were vivid, and the intricate designs made every transaction feel grounded. When the euro arrived, we gained convenience, but we lost a unique piece of everyday art that lived in our wallets, a daily reminder of our national identity. For the teenagers of the 1970s and asks, freedom came on 2 wheels and smelled of 2-stroke oil. The moped culture, the Brommers, was a rite of passage. If you rode a Pooch with its high handlebars or a sporty Zundap, you instantly belonged to a specific tribe. The ritual involved spending hours tinkering with the engine in a cold garage, trying to make it run just a little bit faster, a little bit louder, and the ultimate destination was always the local snack bar. On a Friday night, the neon lights of the snack bar drew us in like moths. We would park the mopeds in a neat row outside, our leather jackets smelling of gasoline and cheap cologne. Inside, we fed coins into the jukebox to play the golden earring while ordering a patatcha met, French fries drowning in thick mayonnaise served in a pointed paper cone. It was the sanctuary of our youth, a place where we felt grown up, independent, and invincible. Saturday mornings in the suburbs featured a synchronized neighborhood ritual that spoke volumes about pride and routine. It was the weekly washing of the car. Around 9 in the morning, front doors would open and fathers would emerge carrying bright plastic buckets filled with hot, soapy water. The smell of cheap car shampoo mixed with the fresh morning air. The garden hose would be uncoiled and the sponges would go to work. This was not just about having a clean vehicle, it was the ultimate excuse for neighbors to socialize. Across the driveways and low hedges, men would lean on their wet sponges and discuss the weather, the local football results, or the rising price of petrol. Children were often enlisted to wash the hubcaps for a few extra cents of pocket money. By noon, the street was lined with sparkling clean cars, drying in the sunshine, a collective display of order and Saturday morning contentment. There was one ritual we all universally dreaded, yet it bound us together in a shared, low-level anxiety. It was the payment of the television and radio tax, the Kijk- en Luistergeld. To own a television or a radio, you had to buy special stamps from the post office and stick them into a little booklet to prove you had paid your dues. The ritual of anxiety peaked when rumors spread that the inspector was in the neighborhood. These inspectors had vans equipped with mysterious antennas that could allegedly detect if a television was turned on inside a house. If there was a knock at the door and the booklet was not completely up to date, panic ensued. People would throw blankets over the television set, pretend not to be home, or quietly sneak out the back door. When this tax was finally abolished in the year 2000, a collective sigh of relief washed over the entire country. We were finally free to watch television without looking over our shoulders. Let us talk about a daily morning ritual that might confuse the rest of the world, but for us, it was the only proper way to start the day. Breakfast was not complicated, but it required precise architecture. We are talking about the sacred combination of a slice of bread, a thick layer of real butter, and hagelslag, the chocolate sprinkles. The ritual began with slicing a fresh loaf of bread. The butter had to be spread thickly and evenly, acting as the essential glue. Then, you took the cardboard box of sprinkles. The sound of the chocolate raining down onto the bread was a delightful, rustling whisper. The critical step was pressing the sprinkles down with the flat side of your knife, ensuring they adhered to the butter so they would not spill all over your lap when you took a bite. The mix of the savory, creamy butter and the sweet, crunchy chocolate was the taste of a safe, predictable Dutch morning. Another sound that structured our days was the sharp metallic snap of the letterbox in the front door. Before emails and instant messages, the arrival of the postman was a significant daily event. The PTT postman, dressed in his familiar uniform, walked his route with a heavy leather bag slung over his shoulder. He did not just drop off bills and advertisements, he brought handwritten letters from relatives, colourful postcards from friends on holiday in Spain, and beautiful physical birthday cards. The ritual involved hearing those footsteps approaching the door, the rustle of paper, and that defining snap of the metal flap. You would rush to the hallway to gather the envelopes scattered on the doormat. Recognizing the handwriting on an envelope before even opening it brought a thrill of anticipation that a digital notification can never, ever replicate. It was a tangible piece of someone's time and thought, delivered right into your hands. When our families took to the highways for a summer holiday or a weekend trip, we traveled with a sense of absolute security thanks to the Wegenwacht. The bright yellow cars, often with a sidecar attached in the earlier days, patrolled the roads looking for stranded motorists. Being a member of the ANWB was a serious matter, and you proudly displayed their metal badge on the front grille of your car. The ritual that is deeply missed is the salute. When you drove past a Wegenwacht patrol, the mechanic would see the badge on your car and give a crisp, friendly salute. My father would always sit up a little straighter and salute back. It was a silent pact of solidarity on the open road. It meant that no matter what happened, whether a flat tire or a boiling radiator, you were not alone out there. The yellow car was a knight in shining armor, a symbol of a society that looked out for one another. As the year drew to a close, December 31st brought our most flavorful and smoke-filled ritual. New Year's Eve was synonymous with the baking of oliebollen, the traditional deep-fried dough balls. Because boiling a massive pot of oil leaves a lingering smell, this ritual was often banished to the cold garage, the shed, or the back garden. Fathers would stand in the freezing cold, bundled up in thick coats, carefully dropping scoops of dough studded with raisins into the bubbling, dangerously hot fat. Inside, the house was warm and filled with family. The television was permanently tuned to the Oudejaarsconference conference, the traditional New Year's Eve cabaret show. Wim Kan or Freek de Jonge would humorously summarize the year, and the entire nation watched, laughing at the same jokes. At midnight, we would eat the hot oliebollen, completely covered in powdered sugar, the sweet dust inevitably falling all over our festive clothes as we wished each other a happy new year. The weekend television schedule held one more unforgettable ritual: the massive Saturday night entertainment shows. We did not have on-demand streaming. We had one or two channels, and we all watched together. The living room curtains were drawn tightly against the dark evening. A glass bowl of potato chips or a plate of cheese cubes and slices of liverwurst was placed on the coffee table. The whole family would gather on the sofa to watch legends like Rudy Karel or Willem Rouse host spectacular, larger-than-life game shows. The energy of these broadcasts was electric. We rooted for everyday people trying to win a new car or a holiday. The charm was in the shared experience. We knew that at that exact moment, millions of other families were sitting in their own living rooms, eating the same chips, laughing at the exact same jokes. It unified the country in a way that modern media simply cannot achieve. And finally, we arrive at the very heart of the winter home, the ritual of the coal stove. Before the luxury of central heating spread across the nation, the living room stove was the center of our universe. The ritual began with the coal delivery man, a tough figure whose face and hands were perpetually covered in black soot. He would carry heavy sacks of coal and pour them into the storage bin in the shed. Bringing the coal inside was a daily chore, carrying the heavy scuttle into the living room. Lighting the stove was an art form, requiring crumpled newspapers, kindling wood, and immense patience. But the reward was the glowing, red-hot belly of the stove. The heat it radiated was intense, localized, and profoundly comforting. You had to sit close to it to stay warm, meaning the entire family naturally huddled together in the same small space. The smell of the coal, the ticking of the cooling metal, and the mesmerizing dance of the flames behind the small mica windows provided a sense of cozy safety that no modern radiator could ever match. When we look back at these 20 memories, it becomes clear that we do not just miss the objects themselves. We do not necessarily miss hauling heavy buckets of water for a bath or shivering in the cold to bake dough in a shed. What we truly miss is the feeling of that time. We miss the slow, deliberate pace of life. We miss the forced closeness, the way a coal stove or a single television set brought the whole family into one room. We miss a world where things took time, where effort was required, and where waiting made the reward so much sweeter. Thank you for taking this walk down memory lane with me today. If this video brought a smile to your face or a tear to your eye, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps us keep these memories alive for the next generation. Now, I have a question for you. Which of these rituals do you miss the most? Or was there a special Dutch tradition in your family that we did not mention? Please write your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I cannot wait to share in your memories.